History isn't always a dusty museum. Sometimes it's a raging battleground, a royal catfight, or a revolution in velvet slippers. Forget everything you thought you knew about the past. These dramas rip off the powdered wigs and let you eavesdrop on the power plays, heartbreaks, and backroom deals that built empires and toppled legends. Ever wonder what really goes on behind palace doors or inside a revolutionary's head? Buckle up, because what you're about to see isn't the history you learned in school. Who says real life can't steal the show? The Crown. If you still think the British monarchy is all tea cozies and polite hand waves, The Crown will blow that illusion straight out of Buckingham Palace. This is not a costume parade, it's a front row seat to a royal soap opera that just happens to be true, or at least true enough to spark heated family meetings at Windsor. Starting with a young Queen Elizabeth, brilliantly played by Claire Foy, and hurtling through scandals, marriages, betrayals, and prime ministers with all the subtlety of a tabloid bombshell, this series goes where official biographers fear to tread. Every episode is packed with more political landmines than a Cold War summit. We see Elizabeth trying to keep her head above the rising tide of tradition, protocol, and the ever-watchful public eye. The drama behind closed doors? It's jaw-dropping. Philip wrestling with his own role, Margaret blazing through scandal after scandal, the world changing in real time outside palace walls. Olivia Colman takes the crown as an older Elizabeth, bringing a regal chill to scenes that cut sharper than the crown jewels. What really makes The Crown addictive is how it dives beneath the surface, showing a queen who's not just a figurehead, but a woman who can't afford a single misstep. You feel the pressure, the loneliness, and the constant aching need to hold everything together while history throws curveball after curveball at the throne. With impeccable casting, writing that refuses to sugarcoat, and more tension than most thrillers, The Crown isn't just a royal family album. It's a living, breathing portrait of power, fragile, heavy, and just a little bit dangerous. Monarchists, skeptics, and drama junkies, you're all invited. John Adams. Think America's founding was all stirring speeches and noble handshakes? Think again. HBO's John Adams shreds the cherry tree myth and gets down in the mud with the real architects of the United States, warts, wigs, and all. Paul Giamatti isn't here to make John Adams a marble statue. He plays him as a man fueled by nerves, stubbornness, and a fierce sense of duty that sometimes makes him his own worst enemy. Laura Linney as Abigail Adams proves that behind every revolution is someone with a sharper mind and a cooler head than the guys in powdered hairpieces. This isn't a fireworks and freedom parade. The American Revolution, in John Adams, is terrifyingly real. Streets running with tension, alliances breaking and reforming in smoky taverns, friends turning rivals with a single vote. You'll see Adams risk everything for a country that barely exists and get nothing but headaches in return. He's a crank, a patriot, a visionary, and occasionally a royal pain. Precisely the kind of man who'd annoy his way into the history books. The magic of this series is in the details. No one's whitewashed. Benjamin Franklin is wily and shameless. Thomas Jefferson is equal parts charming and cryptic. And George Washington isn't some distant myth. He's a real guy with doubts and shadows under his eyes. The show doesn't flinch from showing the cost of nation building. Betrayal, disease, and heartbreak stalk the Adams family from Boston to the White House. You can practically feel the candle wax drip and the Constitution's ink drying as new, dangerous ideas take shape. By the end, you realize the American dream wasn't just a glorious experiment. It was a knife fight in a back alley, with history hanging in the balance. John Adams dares to show the mess and the magic, the pride and the price. It's living proof that the birth of a nation isn't something to put on a pedestal. It's something you watch with your heart pounding and your fists clenched. Marie Antoinette 2022. What do you get when you throw a teenage Austrian into the snake pit of Versailles and tell her to become Queen of France? Marie Antoinette answers with a riot of color, chaos, and pure historical adrenaline. Forget the tired, let-them-eat-cake caricature. This is a flesh and blood Marie, terrified and defiant, juggling a court so vicious it makes high school look like a picnic. Emilia Schula's performance is both raw and rebellious, capturing the panic and ambition of a girl turned icon before she even understood the rules of the game. The series refuses to paint the queen as either villain or victim. Instead, we see Marie teetering on a tightrope, constantly maneuvering through rumors, betrayals, and a husband as lost as she is. The costumes dazzle, yes, but behind the silks and powdered faces is a countdown to disaster ticking louder with every episode. The writers aren't afraid to show the grit beneath the glamour, the loneliness of a foreign princess, and the creeping dread as revolution inches closer to the gates. What makes this Marie Antoinette stand out is its refusal to let history's most misunderstood queen fade into a punchline. Every episode reminds you, she was a young woman trapped in a world built to break her, but she fought for every scrap of agency she could snatch. The shadow of the guillotine hovers, but so does the glimmer of a human being lost to centuries of gossip. If you think you know her story, this series will make you think again, and you might even catch yourself rooting for her all the way to the bitter end. Selma, 2014. Some movies don't just tell history, they grab you by the collar and pull you into the fight. Selma is that kind of film. Centered on the 1965 voting rights marches from Selma to Montgomery, it throws you into the middle of a movement that changed America, with all its raw danger and defiant hope. David Oyelowo becomes Martin Luther King Jr. So completely, you almost forget you're watching a performance. He radiates quiet force, pain, and the endless fatigue of carrying a nation's dream on your shoulders. Director Ava DuVernay doesn't pretty up the struggle. You see brutality, betrayals, and backroom deals, but also the kind of determination that makes history happen. The supporting cast is stacked, but it's Carmen Ahogo's Coretta Scott King who quietly steals every scene she's in, showing the cost of activism at home as well as on the street. Selma doesn't shy away from the ugly realities: police batons, government resistance, public indifference. Every step across that bridge feels earned, dangerous, and world-changing. But there's triumph here, too. The film pulses with the beat of gospel choirs, protest songs, and the voices of ordinary people demanding justice. The impact lands hard. Selma is not ancient history. Its echoes are still loud in today's headlines. By the final scenes, you'll feel every ache and every hard-won victory, and you'll know that courage isn't just a word for monuments, but a force that still demands to be lived. The Last Emperor, 1987. Step inside the Forbidden City, and you'll find a boy with the weight of a vanished world on his shoulders. The Last Emperor is both epic spectacle and haunting character study, following Puyi, the child king who became the final ruler of Imperial China, only to watch his throne crumble before he was old enough to read the morning papers. The scale is mind-blowing. Real palaces, teeming courtyards, the grandeur of a dynasty gasping its last. But the real power of this film is its intimate sorrow. John Lone delivers a quietly devastating performance as Puyi, charting his journey from pampered puppet to tragic exile. The palace is a golden prison, and every ceremony is laced with the knowledge that the outside world is closing in. As revolutions rage and new ideologies stampede through China, Puyi clings to old rituals, lost friends, and a fading sense of self. The cinematography is a feast, lush, sweeping, unforgettable. Yet, for all its grandeur, The Last Emperor never loses sight of the boy inside the robes, bewildered by the pageantry, desperate for connection. By the time the story ends, you're left with more than a history lesson. You feel the collapse of centuries in one lonely figure, reminding us that behind every legend is a life that rarely turns out as planned. If you think power is a birthright, Elizabeth is here to slap you awake. Cate Blanchett bursts onto the screen as the young, untested Queen of England, surrounded by traitors, stalked by religious fanatics, and dismissed as a pawn by every sneering lord in the room. The film isn't gentle. It hurls you into a world where the wrong whisper can get you beheaded, and trust is a luxury no monarch can afford. Blanchett's transformation from frightened girl to Iron Queen is pure cinematic electricity. She makes you feel every doubt and heartbreak as Elizabeth sheds her innocence for armor, outsmarting her enemies and rewriting the rules of rule itself. Geoffrey Rush, as the ever-watchful Walsingham, is the loyal shadow lurking at her side, while Joseph Fiennes brings a dash of forbidden romance to a court where love is always dangerous. The intrigue crackles, poisoned letters, plots behind tapestries, and alliances forged in desperation. But the heart of the movie is Elizabeth herself, learning to rule in a man's world, sacrificing almost everything for the throne, and declaring, with fire in her eyes, that she will be married to England. By the final act, you're not just watching history, you're watching the birth of a legend, forged in fire, steel, and a will no one saw coming. Lincoln, 2012. Lincoln is not the sweeping battlefield drama you might expect. It's sharper, quieter, and more dangerous, set almost entirely in the hothouse of 1865 Washington. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't just play Abraham Lincoln, he resurrects him, turning the president into a living paradox, folksy and brilliant, melancholy and determined, gentle but unyielding. The stakes are brutal. The Civil War is still raging, and Lincoln is racing to end slavery before the last cannon falls silent. This is a movie about words as weapons. Steven Spielberg fills every frame with the grind and hustle of political trench warfare. You get late-night bargaining, fiery debates, and backroom deals as Lincoln chases the 13th Amendment, knowing that one wrong move could doom both the country and his legacy. Sally Field's Mary Todd Lincoln is fierce, wounded, and never far from heartbreak, while Tommy Lee Jones rips into the screen as the radical Thaddeus Stevens. Every conversation feels like a chess match with history itself. You see the exhaustion in Lincoln's eyes, the weight of every decision pressing down on him. Yet, what lingers most is his wry humor and the way he leads, by telling stories, by listening, by refusing to give up hope when hope seems impossible. Lincoln makes politics look deadly, noble, and utterly human all at once. The favorite 2018. Palace intrigue has never looked so deliciously twisted. The favorite ditches the dust and lets you wallow in the mud, literally and figuratively, of Queen Anne's England. Olivia Colman's Anne is not the typical regal heroine. She's vulnerable, needy, and manipulated at every turn by two rivals who redefine the word ruthless. Rachel Weisz's Sarah Churchill and Emma Stone's Abigail Masham Spar plot and seduce their way through the shadowy corridors of power, turning the court into a blood sport with bonnets. Director Yorgos Lanthimos serves up history with a wink and a stab, filling every scene with biting humor and sharp elbows. Don't expect reverence. The favorite paints its trio as flawed, fascinating, and deeply human, ambitious, hurt, and always ready to turn on each other. The set design is lush. The dialogue snaps like a mousetrap, and the politics are as messy as the mud outside the palace walls. At its core, this is a story about the loneliness of leadership and the hunger for affection, disguised in powdered wigs and rabbit races. The result? A history lesson that's outrageous, biting, and impossible to look away from. By the end, you'll never see royal favoritism or betrayal quite the same way again. Katherine the Great, 2019. Step aside stodgy history lessons. HBO's Katherine the Great is a royal roller coaster with Helen Mirren in full command. This series plunges you into Imperial Russia, where power is grabbed with both hands and no one survives by playing nice. Mirren's Katherine is magnetic, blending steel with seduction, shattering tradition, and dispatching rivals with a single icy glare. She's not just fighting for her throne, she's rewriting the rules of empire on her own terms. The series revels in excess, lavish palaces, thunderous armies, and a cast of courtiers more treacherous than a snake pit. But beneath the spectacle is the story of a woman who never stops outsmarting the men who want to sideline her. Katherine faces conspiracies, betrayals, and heartbreak, yet her ambition never wavers. The show refuses to reduce her to a cliché. She's complex, driven, and surprisingly modern in her vision. Every episode is loaded with danger and decadence, but also quiet moments of doubt and longing. The result? A portrait of a ruler who turned an empire upside down and proved that greatness comes in many forms, some of them crowned, most of them entirely unstoppable. Katherine doesn't just claim power, she makes it impossible to look away.